I'm taking on Tom from Golden Goal Fantasy Football as we give our predictions for FPL Players Prices for the 23-24 season. In today's video, we'll be going over the top 15 point-scoring defenders from the previous FPL season. First up, it's Rico Henry. You have to say that Brentford have had a very impressive season all round, especially doing the double over Man City on the final day of the campaign. Although Henry seems almost nailed to start week to week for the Bees, he doesn't really offer much in terms of attacking threat, and for that reason I think he'll remain at 4.5 million going into the next FPL season.
So Rico Henry, I don't mean this in any way to offend Brentford fans or anything, but I just see him as your standard run-of-the-mill 4.5 million defender. To be honest though, depending on how other defenders are priced, I genuinely consider starting with him in my team next season if there aren't many good other 4.5 million defenders. But that's my prediction, 4.5 million. I think there's two prices that Saliba could hover around after the season that he's just had for Arsenal, and I think it depends how FPL want to do it really in terms of defenders. For me, the two prices he falls around are 5 and 5.5 million, and I just think with the strong defence that Arsenal had last season, I think he's going to perform really well next season. I'm going to go 5.5 million for Saliba.
Saliba's an interesting one for me. Despite missing a lot of the second half of the season, his price was still 0.4 million more than what he started the season at, with a couple of additions over the transfer window. I think Arsenal will come back very strong next year. I'm not sure whether they'll challenge for the title again, but I still expect them to dominate plenty of teams they come up against. I reckon Saliba's going to get a price rise to 5.5 million this season, mainly due to the fact that he's got good goal threat from set pieces, and I think he'll continue to have a good centre-back partnership with Gabriel. Many of us had high expectations for Robertson coming into the 22-23 FPL season, but in the end, he really did underperform on his price tag of 7 million. We did see a resurgence from Liverpool towards the end of the season, when they won 7 games in a row and kept 3 clean sheets. But during that time we also saw Klopp change the formation, with Trent moving into midfield. I actually think the change of formation harmed Robertson's attacking output, and for that reason I think we're going to see a price drop by 0.5 for Robertson to 6.5 million.
I feel like Andy Robertson had a slightly disappointing season in FPL compared to his normal amazing standard. He is the top scoring FPL defender in history. He's got the highest season total of any defender ever. Next season, I do feel like he's going to up his game. With Liverpool, I think just signing some good midfielders with some legs. I think that's what they were missing last season, to be honest, is some midfielders that could run around and actually cover the defence a little bit. As for Robertson, I think he could be 6.5 million next season. Now, Luke Shaw has had a really, really strong season, in my opinion, and he's proved that he can play both at left-back and left centre-back, covering for injured players in that team. I think in terms of his price, it depends how FPL see, United as a defence as a whole. Whether they see Man United in that elite segment of defences, which to be fair, they have not been in previous seasons. And that's why I think Shaw was priced so low this year. My prediction, I think you're going to see a rise for Shaw. I think he could come in at something like 6 million.
United got off to a rocky start when the last season got underway, but they definitely came back strong at the turn of the year, and Luke Shaw became one of the most reliable assets for returning FPL points. He started out the season at 5 million, and I'm almost certain we're going to see a price rise this year, as Man United picked up the most clean sheets in the 22-23 season, and Shaw was able to play in multiple positions across the back line. I'm actually going to go for 6 million for Shaw. I think being nailed to start and having some set pieces makes him a really tempting asset to go for from the start. Virgil van Dijk is another defender who I think largely underdelivered on his price tag last season. Liverpool conceded 47 goals last year, and it took them till around game week 23 to start picking up clean sheets. Van Dijk scored a total of 3 goals in the previous campaign, and I personally expected him to pick up more attacking returns, especially with players like Robertson and Trent in the side, who are able to deliver decent crosses from set pieces. I think we're going to see a price fall for Van Dijk this year to 6 million, and I reckon there'll be better defensive options elsewhere.
Now, similar to Robertson, Virgil van Dijk had a season that wasn't quite at the level of last year. In terms of his FPL price though, I think similar to Robertson actually, he could see a bit of a drop. I think Van Dijk, based on how he performed this year, could come in at 6 million. Now, I'm not sure I'd even heard of Pervis Estupiñán before the start of the season. Obviously, Brighton played well and above people's expectations of what they could achieve. And I think that's going to be, it was obviously reflected in their prices this season, right? The defenders were all priced really low. But I think next season, they're obviously going to see a bit of a rise. For me, I think Estupinian could fall between 5 or 5.5 million. I think FPL are going to be nice on him though. They're going to give him 5 million as a price tag.
Estupinian had to be one of the most value for money defenders in FPL in the 22-23 season, especially in the second half of the campaign. He started the season at 4.5 million and ended it at 5 million. With the way De Zerbi utilises him, he's able to get into advanced positions on the pitch multiple times per game, and because of that he managed to return 7 assists. I think the Brighton left wing back will get a decent price rise this season to 5.5 million. Newcastle were one of the best defences in the Premier League last season, and one of the key reasons for that was the addition of Sven Botman to the back line. Botman came into the game at 4.5 million, and almost instantly he outperformed that price tag, helping Newcastle to keep 6 straight clean sheets between game week 16 and game week 22. Having said that, he didn't offer much in terms of attacking threat from set pieces, so for that reason I predict him to get a marginal price rise to 5 million for the upcoming FPL season.
Now, Newcastle obviously had a really strong season defensively. Botman, I'd argue, was one of the picks of the 4.5 million defenders. I think that was also partly down to the fact that Newcastle had a good number of fixtures for the run-in as well. He doesn't offer a lot of attacking threat, so I don't think we're going to see him in the upper echelons of defenders, but Newcastle playing really well. He's the first choice centre-back in their team. I think we're going to see a rise out of Botman, although I only think it will be to 5 million. Now, Dan Burn cemented himself last season as the first choice left-back for Newcastle, playing or starting most of the games. 4.5 million I think was a good price for him, and to be honest, I feel like he let us down a little bit in terms of attacking returns that he actually got. Whenever I saw Newcastle play, he seemed to get on the end of pretty much all of their set pieces in corners and just couldn't convert. Maybe that was just the games I was watching. I think similar to Botman though, he does offer similar goal threat. I think he's going to go up to 5.
Although he perhaps didn't perform as well as Botman throughout the season, Dan Burn still had a very impressive campaign playing at left back for the Magpies. Burn was a continuous starter for Newcastle when they went through that remarkable unbeaten run halfway through the season, and he did look a threat once or twice from set pieces. I predict Burn to come into the next FPL season priced the same as Botman at 5 million. However, I do think his place in the team is more at risk, especially as Newcastle are in talks to sign Kieran Tierney. Tyrone Mings was one of the heroes in FPL towards the tail end of the season, when Villa picked up momentum and somehow went from near the bottom of the table to finishing in a European spot. Aston Villa kept 8 clean sheets between game week 25 and game week 33, and during that time Mings picked up 11 bonus points in FPL. I do think we're going to see a price rise for Mings up to 5 million this season, because he's part of a solid defensive side, and he's always involved in action during corners and free kicks. Tom, what's your thoughts?
Tyrone Mings, an absolute hero in some people's FPL team, and of course, with my luck, he never made it anywhere near mine. I know FPL Guns, the guy that won FPL, he can pretty much credit his FPL win to both Tyrone Mings and Callum Wilson scoring points in his team. I think under Unai Emery, Villa are only going to get better defensively. I think 4.5 at the start of this season at least was a fair price for Tyrone Mings, although next season, I think he's going to see a similar rise to those Newcastle boys, to be honest. I think we're going to see Tyrone Mings at 5 million. For me, Shah, Burn and Botman all fall under a similar category in terms of points potential in fantasy football. I don't think there's a lot between the three of them when you pick them, and to be honest, I don't think there's going to be a lot in their price either. I said 5 million for both Botman and Burn. I'm going to say 5 million for Fabian Schär as well.
Coming into the 22-23 season, Fabian Schär was priced 0.5 million more than both Burn and Botman, and for good reason in my opinion. He's fantastic at spraying passes around the pitch and sending through balls over the top of defenders. Along with that, he sometimes brings the ball further forward and takes long-range shots. Schär's a constant threat from set pieces, and he also takes the odd direct free kick when it's in a decent goal-scoring position. I personally think a 5.5 million price tag would be appropriate for him in the FPL season. Ben Mee had to be one of the biggest surprise packages from the previous campaign, picking up 3 goals, 2 assists, and finishing the season as the 6th top-scoring defender in FPL. Brentford lost a couple of games earlier on in the season by a margin of a few goals, but since the turn of the year, they were far more solid at the back and went through that extraordinary 12-match unbeaten run. Similarly to other centre-backs with decent goal threats, I think Mee will return to the game priced at 5 million.
Ben Mee was obviously the pick of the Brentford defenders, seemed to have a good spell of goals this season. I think his price at 5 million was fair for what you got out of him, and to be completely honest, I think we're going to see him priced very similarly. Again, I don't think he underplayed that value, and I don't think he necessarily overplayed it as well to deserve a rise. I think 5 million is going to be a fair price for me next season. I think Gabriel, similarly to what I said with Saliba, to be fair, he's obviously Arsenal's first choice centre-back alongside Saliba, and I think he's going to be priced similarly. Again, I think it comes down to how elite FPL rank Arsenal as a defence. I think they're going to rank them slightly higher than Newcastle. It's just my opinion, and that means I think he's going to come in around 5.5 million. So 0.5 more than the Newcastle boys, 5.5 million.
For me, Gabriel is one of those defenders who falls exactly between 5 and 5.5 million in FPL, but I think we've seen enough from the Arsenal centre-back last season to warrant a price rise to 5.5 million. After numerous uninspiring seasons for the Gunners, it was a genuine surprise to see them perform so well last year, and I think a key reason for that was the centre-back partnership of Gabriel and Saliba. Both players are dangerous from set pieces, and both are probably nailed to start each week, so I think they both deserve a price rise in FPL. Although Alexander-Arnold finished the season strongly, picking up 8 attacking returns between game week 30 and the end of the campaign, I'm still not sure it's enough for him to get a price rise going into the next FPL season. He scored 156 points, which is 52 less than what he scored in the previous season, and I think a lot of that had to do with Liverpool being easily exposed by teams at the back. I do think it's possible for Trent to have another crazy point-scoring season with his change of position, but for now I think I'll stick with him being 7.5 million for the upcoming season.
Similarly to Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold didn't quite have the season of previous in my opinion. To be honest, I think he got completely found out defensively, and his new midfield inverted fullback role that other Premier League teams have been adopting, I think he's absolutely flourished in. It'll be interesting, obviously I think he's going to be classed as a defender, but given the fact that he's playing in midfield basically, it'll be interesting to see how FPL classify him. For me, I think he's going to stay at the same price. I feel like the end he had to the last season, this season, was so good that he's going to, warrant the price tag that he started with, so I still think 7.5 million is going to be a fair price for Trent. Ben White, again, I think he's going to be similar to the rest of those Arsenal defenders, to be honest. The one thing you can say about White is his position is probably slightly less nailed than Gabriel and Saliba, but you got to feel he's going to be starting first choice right back ahead of Tomiyasu. And for me, that means he's also going to be priced at 5.5 million.
Ben White started the 22-23 season priced 0.5 million less than Gabriel and Saliba, and actually ended up scoring more than both of them by the final day. I find this one of the more difficult players to predict, because I think White will be a good option to select for the upcoming season, but I also feel like he's got less goal threat than the Arsenal centre-backs, and there's also a higher probability that he loses his place in the starting lineup from time to time. I'm going to say that White gets a 0.5 million price increase and starts the season at 5 million, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him come in at 5.5 million. It probably comes as no real surprise that I think the defender who will get the biggest price increase this season will be Kieran Trippier. He managed to finish the season with 42 points more than any other defender, and the key reason for this is because he was probably Newcastle's #1 creative outlook when it came to creating goal-scoring chances, especially through open play crosses, free kicks and corners. You would expect the Magpies to strengthen their squad in the summer transfer window, and I think that will only benefit Trippier going into next season. 7 million is my price prediction for him.
Kieran Trippier then, the top scoring defender in FPL last season. I think his price could fall in a realm of ranges, to be honest. I put the Newcastle centre-backs down at 5 million because I didn't think they offered any sort of attacking upside, really. Obviously, Shah was the star of the lot, but again, I don't really feel he had too much attacking output, whereas Kieran Trippier, by far and away, was almost miles ahead of them, really. I think his price could fall either 6 or 6.5 million. I think just for the fact that he was the top scoring defender this season, I'm going to go 6.5 million.
Finally, there's a few more players who we're going to make a quick prediction on. Firstly is Pedro Porro. Earlier in the season, we had a problem predicting which wingbacks were guaranteed to start week to week for Spurs, but since Pedro Porro joined in January, he started every game other than one from game week 26. He does often find himself in advanced positions and takes plenty of set pieces. I think we're actually going to see a rise in his price from 5 to 5.5 million this year in FPL. Let's hear if Tom's on the same wavelength.
Pedro Porro. I don't really know where to start with him, to be honest. I feel like he's had a very difficult time to join Tottenham Hotspur, but he has performed in some games, although I feel like Tottenham fans have a mixed opinion about him. To be honest, I'm quite surprised how many players they got rid of in order to bring him in. For me, I don't see him being any more than 5 million. I don't think he's a 4.5 million defender. He's not quite that low, but likewise, I don't think he's, a £5.5, £6 million defender either. So 5 million is my prediction for Porro. On his day, I think Reece James is the most well-rounded right back in the league. I think he can do everything. He can go forward, he's quick, he's strong, and he can defend really well too. Unfortunately, he just can't stay fit, and I think that's going to be reflected in his FPL price next season. I've got a feeling he's going to be 5.5 million.
Reece James was a player who many of us looked at on game week 1 and thought was an absolute bargain at 6.5 million. But as the season went on, Chelsea never really got going, and James's place in the starting 11 was regularly disrupted by ongoing injury issues. With Pochettino taking charge at Chelsea, I think the Blues are likely to come back strongly and challenge for a European spot in the table next season. And if James stays fit, he could return to being a fantastic fantasy asset. That being said, with a woeful season scoring just 44 points, I think he's going to receive a price drop to 6 million. Because Man City's squad is so strong, Pep Roulette is an ongoing issue for us FPL managers. However, the thing that tends to work in our favour earlier in the season is the fact that there's no cup competition for City to compete in, so players like Stones should be favoured to play, especially as he's so pivotal to Pep's inverted fullback system. Stones started the 22-23 season priced at 5.5 million, and I think he's going to retain that price moving into next season. If he starts every week, I think he could end up scoring a decent amount of points across the year.
John Stones, in my opinion, has been Man City's best defender, although he hasn't actually been playing in defence for the run-in. Pep's been using him in that midfield pivot alongside Rodri, and he's been absolutely unbelievable. I think you can't really expect him to rise too much, though, in my opinion, because although he seems to have been the strongest defender so far, like next season, you just don't know how Pep's going to line up. So I think he's going to stay the same sort of price. 5.5 million is my prediction for Stones.
A massive thanks to Tom for joining me on today's video. If you haven't yet already, please go over and subscribe to the Golden Goal Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Tom makes plenty of quality content, and I'm sure he's got loads in store for you for the upcoming FPL season. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out our other price prediction videos. Once they're uploaded, they'll be available on the screen now. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon.